Hi guys. So this is our second video on the chapter biological classification. Okay. So in the first video we've learnt about the 5 kingdom classification. We've at least learned the names of the 5 kingdom, right? So 5 kingdom classification किसने दिया? R.H. Whittaker. And what were the 5 kingdoms? First is Monera, M. Second is Protista. Third is fungi, and the 2 higher ones, plants and animalia. Okay, so MPFPA. Okay, MPFPA. So going on to the next topic, yesterday we learnt about kingdom Monera. We learnt about the classification inside kingdom Monera depending upon the nutrition. Today we learn about the reproductive habits of kingdom Monera. And after that we learn in detail about kingdom Protista. Okay, so going on to the first phase of our notes, that is reproduction in kingdom Monera. ठीक है, ये Monera की बात चल रही है. Okay. So basically there are 2 important types of reproduction. One is asexual and the second is genetic recombination. तो asexual का क्या मतलब? Asexual reproduction is that type of reproduction which does not involve another organism. That is, one organism individually can divide or make more progeny. Okay, so how does this happen? So it has 2 different types, that is binary fission and endospore formation. अभी binary fission यानी क्या? Bi यानी 2 and fission यानी breaking. So it is that simple. One bacteria simply breaks off into 2 bacteria. But how? A bacteria is very simply organized. A bacteria has a cell membrane, it has a cell wall and it has this nucleus. So simply there is the division of this nucleus into 2 parts which go towards either end, and then there is the formation of a septum in between. Okay, this is a septum. Now ये septum बनने से क्या होगा? Cell wall और cell membrane दोनों half में divide हो जाएंगे. So each of those grows separately over here. Okay, that is why we get the formation of 2 individual smaller bacteria. These are called daughter cells. This process is called as binary fission. Okay, so going on to the next type, that is endospore formation. Now you need to understand that endospore formation occurs when the conditions are not suitable, that is non-favorable conditions. Non-favorable conditions यानी ऐसी conditions जो अच्छी नहीं है. So this is called as non-favorable conditions. यानी ऐसी कंडीशन जहाँ पे सेल खुद सर्वाइव नहीं कर सकता और सेल डिवाइड भी नहीं कर सकता, बिकॉज देयर इज नॉट इनफ न्यूट्रिशन फॉर द ग्रोइंग बैक्टीरिया. इसीलिए सेल बनाता है समथिंग कॉल्ड एज एंडोस्पोर. ठीक है, अब ये एंडोस्पोर क्या चीज़ है? एंडोस्पोर ये हमारा बैक्टीरिया है. ठीक है, दिस थिंग इज आवर बैक्टीरिया. Okay, now what happens is this endospore is a structure that ensures that the bacteria survives in harsh conditions. So वो अपना न्यूक्लियर मटेरियल यहाँ जमा करेगा. It will gather a little bit of cytoplasm around it and then it will form cell wall, which is trilamellar cell wall around it. Okay, this cell wall has certain components which ensure that it survives high grade heat. It gives us chemical resistance, etc. so that this spore can at least survive in non-favorable conditions. Therefore, when there are favorable conditions, this spore will germinate. This is our spore. In favorable conditions, it will germinate again to form the bacteria. Okay, so this is endospore formation. In endospore formation, the number of individuals does not increase and yet we call it a type of reproduction. Okay, the next is genetic recombination. ठीक है, अब genetic recombination यानी क्या? Genetic recombination शब्द से हमें क्या पता चलता है? Genetic यानी involving genes and recombination यानी mixing, right? So एक बैक्टीरिया का खुद के जीन से थोड़ी मिक्स करेंगे, we'll need another bacteria. So this involves 2 बैक्टीरिया, ठीक है, 2 बैक्टीरिया इन्वॉल्व इन दिस, ठीक है। अब ये बैक्टीरिया अपने जीन्स कैसे मिक्स करते हैं, हाउ दे फॉर्म न्यू टाइप ऑफ बैक्टीरिया, लेट्स सी। द फर्स्ट कैटेगरी, just let me erase this. Yes. Okay, so the first category we need to see is ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन। ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन का क्या मतलब बैक्टीरिया बदल गया। कैसे बदला? वन बैक्टीरिया इज ट्रांसफॉर्म्ड इनटू अनदर बाय ट्रांसफर ऑफ जीन फ्रॉम अनदर बैक्टीरियल सेल। ओके, सो हाउ डज दिस जीन कम इनटू द बैक्टीरिया? सो बेसिकली ये अपना मीडियम है, और इफ देर इज वन बैक्टीरिया प्रेजेंट हियर and there is some part of the genome lying here which belongs to a third bacteria. Okay, ये bacteria dead है, the red bacteria is a dead bacteria and उसका some part of the genome is here. This genome is transferred into a living bacteria and after accepting the external genome it gets transformed. So this process is called as transformation. यानी कि bacteria is transformed by the transfer of a gene from another bacterial cell. Not necessarily live, not necessarily dead, but mostly some genetic content present in the surrounding. Okay. The next category is conjugation. अभी हमने conjugation word कहाँ सुना है? हमने पिलाई में सुना था कि पिलाई are useful for conjugation. So this is that only conjugation. ठीक है? So conjugation is genetic transfer by physical contact between two cells. ठीक है? That is, this is one bacteria and this is the other bacteria and there has to be physical contact through something called as pili. These are conjugation pili. So pili basically क्या है? Pili एक ट्यूब की तरह फंक्शन करता है. So this tube allows the genetic content to be transferred from this bacteria into this bacteria. So that is the function of pili and this process is called conjugation. That is gene transfer by physical contact between these two cells. ठीक है? The third category, my friends, is transduction. ठीक है? Transduction. Duction यानी यहाँ से वहाँ ले जाना, transmit करना. तो कौन करेगा ये transduction? This is done by something called as a bacteriophage. Bacteriophage are those kind of viruses which affect bacteria. यानी जैसे हमें वायरल इन्फेक्शन होता है, जैसे बैक्टीरिया का वायरल इन्फेक्शन कॉज करते हैं बैक्टीरियोफेज. ठीक है? अब ये बैक्टीरियोफेज किस तरह से ट्रांसडक्शन करता है? बेसिकली जब एक बैक्टीरिया को एक वायरस ने इन्फेक्ट कर लिया, जब वो अगले बैक्टीरिया में जाएगा वो अपने साथ ये बैक्टीरिया का कुछ जेनेटिक कंटेंट भी लेके जाएगा. ठीक है? तो इस बैक्टीरिया में आने के बाद उसने वहाँ से जेनेटिक कंटेंट लाया और ये जेनेटिक कंटेंट इसके साथ मिक्स हो जाएगा, यानी बैक्टीरिया के ओरिजिनल जेनेटिक कंटेंट के साथ. सो इसे हम कहते हैं ट्रांसडक्शन. ठीक है? तो जीन ट्रांसफर इज कैरिड आउट बाय बैक्टीरियोफेज, दैट इज ट्रांसडक्शन. ओके, सो मूविंग ऑन टू द फर्स्ट मेजर एग्जाम्पल ऑफ किंगडम मोनेरा, माय फेवरेट, इट्स ब्लू ग्रीन एल्गेज और साइनोबैक्टीरिया. ठीक है? द ब्लू ग्रीन एल्गे और द साइनोबैक्टीरिया. अभी एल्गे तो प्लांट किंगडम में आएगा ना? नो, दिस इज अ यूनिसेल्युलर ऑर्गेनिज्म विच कैन बी पुट इनटू बोथ द किंगडम्स. ओके, इट इज एन एक्सेप्शन दैट. सो ये ब्लू ग्रीन एल्गे या साइनोबैक्टीरिया इज ऑल्सो स्टडीड इन किंगडम मोनेरा. सो इट वॉज द फर्स्ट ऑर्गेनिज्म टू प्रोड्यूस O2 ऑन अर्थ. See the paramount importance of cyanobacteria? The first organism to produce O2 on earth. Okay, these are photosynthetic prokaryotes and they are not always blue-green in color. That's the paradox. They may be red, like example trichodesmium, which is red color. Okay, so going on further, let's understand the different types of blue-green algae. BGA stands for blue-green algae. Blue-green algae could either be unicellular, they could be colonial, or they could be filamentous. Unicellular यानी कि single cell. Example is spirulina. Colonial यानी कि they live in a colony and every part of the colony might have some different function. So they need to survive because they need to be together to survive. Okay, this is colonial. Example, Annabena. And finally, filamentous. Filamentous यानी arranged in the form of a long filament. ठीक है, this is known as filamentous. Example, oscillatoria. ठीक है. So let's talk about a category called as the nitrogen fixation by BGA. Now why is BGA very famous? It's famous for nitrogen fixation and this is one of its commercial use also. So let's study about it, okay? So a very famous example is rice fields में nitrogen fixation कराने वाला Olosira. Okay, so in rice fields we need high nitrogen content for rice plants to grow well. So we use the species Olosira. It's a type of blue-green algae. Okay. A special kind of cell is found in certain other bacteria like nostoc and Annabena for nitrogen fixation. ठीक है, especially for nitrogen fixation. This cell is called as heterocyst. ठीक है, hetero यानी different, बाकी सेल से अलग है, heterocyst और एक cyst के जैसा है with hard covering. Okay, let's look at this diagram. This is a filamentous BGA that is nostoc और उसके अंदर ये उसके normal cells हैं. ठीक है, these are nostoc cells. This is a mucilaginous sheath around it which protects it in water and helps it stay afloat also. And this, my friends, is the heterocyst which is responsible for nitrogen fixation. ठीक है, nitrogen fix करता है, it's heterocyst. Okay. So going on further, let's look at the second type of eubacteria, that is Archaebacteria. Archaebacteria are those kind of bacteria which can survive in very tremendously harsh conditions. These are different from eubacteria. The bacteria में दो type हैं, Archaebacteria and eubacteria. Eubacteria are the normal modern bacteria that we have seen right now, which include BGA, etc. And Archaebacteria are those bacteria, like the name suggests, archae यानी पुराने. These bacteria have a more primitive origin and are adapted in such a way to live in very harsh conditions. Okay, so let's study about Archaebacteria. So unlike eubacteria, the cell wall of Archaebacteria is not made of peptidoglycan. ठीक है, it is not made of peptidoglycan. So what is it made of? It is made up of complex polysaccharides and polypeptide which have branch structure. Let me highlight this. It is made of complex polysaccharides and polypeptides. ठीक है, and these have a branch structure, and this branch structure is also contributory to the immense strength of the cell wall. So ये एकदम strong cell wall की वजह से वो heat झेल सकते हैं और वो chemicals झेल सकते हैं. ठीक है. Significance is they provide high resistance to high temperature, salinity, that is increased salt content, and extreme pH conditions, that is a lot of acidic or basic environment. ठीक है. So that is the importance of the archaebacterial cell wall made up of 1. complex polysaccharides and 2. complex polypeptides. ठीक है, with a branch structure of course. The next we are going to see are the types of Archaebacteria. Depending upon where they are found and how they derive their nutrition, there are 3 main types of Archaebacteria. ठीक है, तो कौन से हैं? First is methanogens. नेम से क्या पता चलता है कि मिथेनोजेंस यानी मीथेन बनाते हैं ये लोग. ठीक है, सो दीज आर मीथेन प्रोड्यूसिंग बैक्टीरिया. एग्जाम्पल मिथेनोकॉकस. So basically they reduce CO2 or they perform a chemical reaction such a way that methane is produced, and the energy of the chemical reaction is used for their metabolism. The second is halophiles. Halo यानी कि salt और philes यानी कि loving. तो ये है salt loving bacteria, therefore found in saline areas. ठीक है, example halobacterium. Simple. The next category is thermoacidophilus. Again, दो चीज़ें, thermo यानी heat and acido यानी acid and philus यानी कि they love thermal, that is high heat, and acidic content. ठीक है, so these are found in hot sulfur springs. This is the ideal place for such bacteria. उनको heat भी चाहिए, उनको acid भी चाहिए, ठीक है. तो they are found in hot sulfur springs. The example is thermophilus. ठीक है, very simple, right? Methanogens का example is Methanococcus. Halophiles का example is Halobacterium. And thermoacidophiles का example is Thermophilus. ठीक है, okay. So going on to the next type of bacteria found in Monera is Mycoplasma. Okay, so this is the third category, that is Mycoplasma. अभी Mycoplasma की क्या speciality है? Mycoplasma obviously is unicellular. It is one of the smallest prokaryotic organisms. ठीक है, it's even smaller than Eubacteria or Archaebacteria. Next important thing, it has a tri-layered cell membrane made of lipoprotein. We've talked about cell membrane, but what about the cell wall? They do not have a cell wall, hence exhibit pleomorphism. Pleo यानी multiple, बहुत सारा, and morphism यानी कि shape. तो ये बैक्टीरिया के पास सेल वॉल नहीं है, तो उनका स्ट्रक्चर रिजिड नहीं है, तो वो अपना शेप बदल सकते हैं, ठीक है. तो these bacteria can what do you say, pass through bacterial filters because they are very small and they can change their shape easily. So quick revision: Mycoplasma unicellular, they are the smallest prokaryotic organisms and they have a 3-layered cell membrane made of lipoprotein. सेल वॉल है नहीं, तो क्या दिखाएंगे? प्लियोमॉर्फिज्म, that is changing shapes. Okay, so going on to the next page of our notes. That is the beginning of kingdom Protista. So like I told you, kingdom Protista में there is a huge diverse variety of unicellular organisms that present various characteristics. हम किंगडम प्रोटिस्टा में यूजुअली वो ऑर्गेनिज्म को डालते हैं जो बाकी सारे किंगडम्स में फिट ना हो, ठीक है. सो इन सारे वैरायटी को हमने कैसे डिवाइड किया है? किंगडम प्रोटिस्टा इज डिवाइडेड इनटू अ होस्ट ऑफ डिफरेंट डिविजन्स. फर्स्ट, डिपेंडिंग अपॉन वेदर दे हैव अ सेल वॉल. इफ दे हैव अ सेल वॉल देन दे हैव टू कैटेगरीज. वी हैव डायनोफ्लैजिलेट्स एंड डायएटम्स. व्हाट आर द स्पेसिफिक्स? वी लर्न इन अ फ्यू मिनट्स. So we have dinoflagellates and we have diatoms, ठीक है. नेक्स्ट, इफ अगर सेल वॉल एब्सेंट है तो हमारे पास क्या है? यूग्लिनोइड्स, ठीक है. यूग्लिनोइड्स का क्या मतलब है? यूग्लिना लाइक एनिमल्स. तो ये है हमारा यूग्लिना, ठीक है. व्हाट आर इट्स प्रॉपर्टीज? वी लर्न इन अ फ्यू मिनट्स. देन फाइनली स्लाइम मोल्ड्स. स्लाइम मोल्ड्स का एग्जाम्पल इज ऑफ कोर्स स्लाइम मोल्ड बिकॉज इट हैज वन टाइप ऑफ ऑर्गेनिज्म, ठीक है. And apart from this, we have another category called as protozoa. Proto, old, zoa, animals. Very firm, primitive unicellular organisms come under protozoa. ठीक है. So let's study about all these categories. Quick revision: dinoflagellates, diatoms or chrysophytes. Then we have euglenoids. Then we have slime molds. And finally protozoa, ठीक है. Let's start. So we have unicellular eukaryotes. All the animals belonging to Protista are unicellular and they are eukaryotes. Okay, they have both sexual and asexual reproduction, and some of them might be photosynthetic organisms also. So protozoa, which are considered to be the primitive relatives of animals, are also studied in this kingdom. Why? Because they are unicellular and because they are eukaryotes. These are the only two criteria to put animals in Protista. So बाकी kingdoms में जो belong नहीं करते वैसे unicellular eukaryotes को हम Protista में डालते हैं, ठीक है. So going on to the next page. This page is basically a chart which tells us all the characteristics of all these 5 types. Okay, so let's start. The first is पायरोफाइटा. पायरोफाइटा के अंदर कौन से ऑर्गेनिजम्स आते हैं? वी हैव डायनोफ्लैजिलेट्स. अब डायनोफ्लैजिलेट्स कौन से टाइप के हैबिटेट में पाए जाते हैं? डायनोफ्लैजिलेट्स आर फाउंड इन द मरीन हैबिटेट, ठीक है. व्हाट आर द स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ डायनोफ्लैजिलेट्स? वी हैव a cell wall made up of cellulose, therefore they are called as armored algae. अभी algae बोला है, इसका मतलब they must be photosynthetic, right? So these are photosynthetic. These dinoflagellates are marine in nature and have a cell wall made up of cellulose, which makes it hard. Therefore they are called as armored algae. Now they have two flagella. One is transverse and one is longitudinal. एक transverse, like if this is my dinoflagellate, we have a sulcus in the body and there is one transverse flagella which runs here and there is one longitudinal flagella which helps in locomotion. Okay, so what are the colors? We have yellow, we have brown, we have golden, blue or red colors present. ठीक है, and we have the photopigments chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C and xanthophylls present. ठीक है, these are the ones which give it different variety of colors. Next, we will talk about the special characteristics of this. We have Nauticula and Goniologs. These show bioluminescence, therefore called as night lights. ठीक है, which are the two which show bioluminescence? Nauticula and Goniologs. Okay, going on to the next characters. Goniologs appears on the sea surface through rapid multiplication causing red tide. Now we need to understand that Goniologs is a red colored dinoflagellate, and that is why when it multiplies suddenly on the sea surface, the entire surface becomes red. It's called as red tide. The next is Nauticula. It's called as sea ghost. Why? Again, because it's found floating on the sea surface. Dinoflagellates are also called as fire algae. Okay, no wonder they are called as pyrophyta, because red color often gives them the appearance of fire, because the red color floating on the sea surface looks like fire. The best example are Nauticula, that is sea ghost, Seratium and Goniologs, which causes the red tide. ठीक है, going on to the next type, that is Chrysophyta. Chryso color, so Chrysophyta में आते हैं हमारे diatoms and golden algae or desmids. Chrysophyta has two categories, diatoms and desmids. तो उनके location कहाँ है? Like where do we find these chrysophytes? We find them in marine as well as freshwater. Remember, we find chrysophytes in marine and freshwater. ठीक है? The cell wall is made up of cellulose in which silica particles are embedded. Therefore, their outer covering is hard and is called a shell or a frustule. ठीक है? Chrysophytes, which are golden in color, have two types, that is diatoms and desmids. They are found in marine as well as freshwater and have hard silica based shells or frustules. ठीक है, clear till here? Next, the cell wall is made up of two halves which are arranged like the lids of a soap box, which doesn't get destroyed and gets settled at the bottom of the sea, and that settlement of a large number of diatoms together is called diatomaceous earth. ठीक है, तो they are basically just like a soap box. Okay, they're just like a soap box. And the cell wall contains silica. ठीक है, so when they die, this outer covering, the shell or the frustule gets deposited नीचे, and this deposition is called as diatomaceous earth. Okay, now what are the pigments present? We have chlorophyll A, chlorophyll C and xanthophylls. Okay, what are the special characters? They are known as pearls of the ocean and the chief producers of oxygen. Okay, so they have chlorophyll A, C and xanthophylls, जिससे वो photosynthesize करते हैं और बहुत सारे quantity में oxygen produce करते हैं, and that is why they are called producers of oceans, chief producers of oceans, because they photosynthesize and produce a lot of food as well, and they are also called as pearls of the ocean. Okay, and what might be the best examples for this? Diatoms के examples are Navicula and Pinularia. Navicula and Pinularia. Okay. Okay. Going on to the third type, that is Euglenophyta. Euglenophyta में आते हैं euglenoids, that is euglena-like organisms, जो रहते हैं stagnant fresh water में. They need fresh water which is stable or stagnant. Structure क्या है ये लोग का? they are photosynthetic and therefore in presence of sunlight behave as they are photosynthetic in the presence of sunlight, otherwise they are heterotrophs. यानी कि अगर sunlight present है तो they will manufacture their own food, and if they don't have sunlight they will behave as heterotrophs by acquiring food from other sources. Isn't that a very what do you say, a good kind of mode of nutrition? जब sunlight हो photosynthesize कर लो और जब नहीं हो तब heterotroph बन जाओ, right? So the cell wall is absent and the cell is surrounded by a membrane cover called as pellicle. Pellicle has a lot of proteins which help in mobility. Therefore, the euglenoids have the ability to move because of the pellicle. ठीक है? Now they have one functional flagellum, ठीक है, which also helps in locomotion, and they have an additional pair of haploid nucleus. They have the normal diploid nucleus and this is an additional part, ठीक है. Now they have chlorophyll A and chlorophyll B and xanthophylls, ठीक है. So what are its special characters? The examples of these are euglena and paranema. Euglena because euglenoids and paranema. Okay. Going on to the next category, that is slime molds. So slime molds में एक ही type के organisms आते हैं, which are slime molds. So the organisms are false fungi. The slime molds are known as false fungi. Okay, तो habitat क्या है? Fungi है, इसलिए decaying matter में रहेंगे, saprophytic रहेंगे. Their structure is of a slimy mass, hence called as slime molds. Special characters include they form an aggregation called as plasmodium, which forms fruiting bodies with spores in unfavorable conditions. So it's usually in normal favorable conditions like a slimy mass, and in unfavorable conditions they club together to form a plasmodium which releases spores. Now these spores, when they fall elsewhere, can grow into new slime mold. The spores are dispersed by air currents, ठीक है, because they are very light and can go from one area to the other. Example is Physarum. Okay, the one example you need to know is Physarum. Okay, the next category that we have not discussed here is protozoans, that is primitive unicellular organisms. ठीक है, these are the ancestors of organisms, animals. So these are heterotrophs because they are animal-like, and they have four major groups depending upon their size, shape, morphology and mode of nutrition. The first is amoeboid protozoans, and like the name suggests, amoeboid यानी कि amoeba जैसे हैं. They live in water, that is fresh or sea water or moist soil, and can have silica cells. ठीक है, they can have silica shells. Not all of them have, but some of them do have silica shells for protection. They capture and move via pseudophilia, their false feet. Pseudo यानी कि false and podia यानी कि feet. So they have pseudopodia or false feet. Examples are entamoeba, that is a parasite, and actinophris, that is a sun animalcule. ठीक है. The main example you need to remember though is entamoeba, which is a parasite and cause amoebiasis. ठीक है. Going on to the next type. The next type of protozoans are flagellated protozoans or mastigophora. ठीक है. These are free living parasites because they are flagellated, obviously they can move around, so they are free living, and they could be parasitic as well. Okay. So they have a flagella, and the example is trypanosoma, which is a parasite by the way, which causes sleeping sickness. ठीक है, trypanosoma causes sleeping sickness. Okay, the second is Leishmania donovani. Leishmania causes kala azar. ठीक है, trypanosoma causes sleeping sickness and Leishmania causes kala azar. Next is ciliated protozoans. अभी इन लोग में flagella था और इन लोग में cilia है. ठीक है, these are ciliated protozoans. Therefore, with the help of cilia, they can actively move around. So they are actively moving and have a special characteristic called a gullet. अब ये gullet क्या है? Gullet is basically a cavity which functions like the stomach or the gut. ठीक है, in which the food is digested. So after they have engulfed food, they try to, with the help of cilia, pass it on to the region where the gullet opens, and inside the gullet they digest food. Example is paramecium. Now one example paramecium, जिसके बारे में आपको ये याद रखना है कि paramecium का shape is slipper like, ठीक है, it is slipper like and it has a gullet. Okay, the next category my friends is sporozoans. स्पोर यानी कि फॉर्मेशन ऑफ स्पोर्स जो करते हैं, those are called as sporozoans. They have an infectious spore-like stage in their life cycle and that is why they are called as sporozoans. इसका बेस्ट एग्जाम्पल कौन है? प्लाज्मोडियम. प्लाज्मोडियम वाइवैक्स एक्सेट्रा सुना है ना. प्लाज्मोडियम इज फेमस टू कॉज मलेरिया. ओके, it has 4 kinds of plasmodiums, but you don't need to remember it at this level. Just remember that Plasmodium produces an infectious spore-like stage in the life cycle and therefore is a part of sporozoans and it causes malaria. Okay, so hence guys we have finally covered kingdom Protista also. So हमने क्या क्या देखा आज? हमने देखा कि हमने Monera को depending upon their reproductive habits कैसे divide किया. Then we went on to Protista. We learnt about the different 5 categories in Protista. That is dinoflagellates, diatoms, euglenoids, slime molds and finally protozoans. Then in protozoans also we learnt about the different categories. There could be flagellate or ciliates, we could have sporozoans or amoeboid. Okay, so all this was about Protista. In the next video we will learn about kingdom fungi. Okay, bye.